And welcome to the One Community Project's weekly webinar series brought to you by ProviderSearch.com. You can join us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to gain insights from different professionals around the world. My name is Tyler Burke, and I am the webinar organizer and today's moderator. It is my pleasure to introduce Joanne Lara to today's program. Ms. Lara earned her Master's in Special Education, Moderate, Severe, and Multiple Disabilities from California State University, Northridge, and her Bachelor's in Dance from the University of South Florida. She holds a California Moderate Severe Education Specialist K-12 teaching credential and taught in the Los Angeles Unified School District for over 10 years, where she worked exclusively with students with autism. Ms. Lara is the director of the Behavioral ABA branch of Autism Movement Therapy-AMT based in Los Angeles, California. Joanne, thanks so much for joining us today.
So let's talk about what autism is. It's a neurological brain difference that profoundly affects a person's ability to communicate, which is speech and language, form relationships with others, which is the social skills criteria piece, and respond appropriately to the environment, which is the behavioral piece of the criteria for autism. If you'll notice, I put difference up there. I was actually doing an Autism Speaks. We had Autism Movement Therapy had 2 Autism Speaks grants this year. And we certified 10 individuals who were older on the autism spectrum in autism movement therapy. And as I was presenting the PowerPoint, one of the individuals raised his hand and he said, and at that point I had neurological brain impairment that profoundly affects. And he said, would you mind changing impairment to difference? And I said, bingo, a light went off in my head. Why not? Of course. So I think it honors and brings dignity to our individuals with autism. So it reads, autism is a neurological brain difference that profoundly affects a person's ability to communicate, form relationships with others, and respond appropriately to the environment. What is autism movement therapy? Well, Temple Grandin, I've been blessed to have an endorsement from Temple Grandin, and she says programs like Joanne's Autism Movement Therapy offer opportunities for our kids to develop the necessary and fundamental skills that benefit all our kids. Art saved my life. I actually produced a documentary that will be out soon. It's called Generation A, Portraits of Autism and the Arts, and Temple Grandin and Stephen Shore, Elaine Hall, Ed Asner, and a number of other individuals on the autism spectrum are highlighted and spotlighted in the film. And Temple looks straight into the camera at one point and says, art saved my life. And she talks about how important the arts were for her when she was a child. She drew with pen and ink. She also did needlepoint. And she talks about the problem-solving skills that are used in the arts and how that enhances and encourages the transmission of neural information in the brain. So Temple is a very big supporter of the arts, and it's her new platform, actually. She's talking a lot about the brain and the arts. This is a picture of another one of the Autism Speaks grants that we got, which was a spring program, Monday through Friday during the spring break here in Los Angeles. And we provided autism movement therapy for an hour, and then a music session with Karen Howard from the Miracle Project. She works with Elaine Hall, and we had 12 Remo drums, and all these students that you see there did an hour drumming session, and then they had another break and a snack, and they did art with Carrie Bowers, who is the art therapist who works with me and the Miracle Project, and she's the gal with the white shirt and the black headband. But here they are with their certifications from the Expressive Arts Spring Camp here in Los Angeles. There they are with some of the art that they did. And this is the group of individuals who are on the spectrum who are certified in Autism Movement Therapy in March through the Autism Speaks grant. The individual in the middle with the headphones is Elaine Hall's son. His name is Neil Katz, and he wears headphones, and he communicates through facilitated communication. He's a very interesting guy. Here's some more pictures from, there's the drumming up on the right-hand corner. You see the drum session. A lot of relationships, friendships were formed at this Autism Movement Therapy Certification Workshop by individuals on the spectrum. So what are we really talking about? Individuals with autism have difficulty accessing and retrieving information in both the long and the short-term memory banks. We know that. Short-term memory bank, it lives in the frontal lobe, at the front of the brain, and the long-term memory lives at the back of the brain. So the good news is that we know through empirical research, and the scientists tell us, that you can jumpstart the impaired informational pathways. That's what Autism Movement Therapy is about. This is an article that I wrote for Autism Asperger's Digest, and you can access it through the fox.com website. So, did you know, and Temple tells us, that rapid movement activates the amygdala, and that's the brain's emotional center, and that up and down, forward and side, and sudden halting, side-to-side movement, help to organize the brain, making an individual more available for learning. More available for learning is the key. What we're really doing is activating the neurotransmission of the information centers in the brain through the four lobes, through the cortex that surrounds the brain, the bark, if you will, that lies under the skull, making sure that those transmissions of those informations are going to the right place. What happens with our kids with autism is the corpus callosum, which is the center bridge between the left and right hemispheres of the brain, is not working. Our kids are one-sided. They're either left-sided or right-sided. Usually they're right-sided. They're using most of the information and retrieving most of the information from the right side of the brain because speech and language lives predominantly in the left side of the brain, and that's a criteria for autism itself. So those two areas, and we're going to talk more about the two areas in the left side of the hemisphere of the brain that are actually controlling speech and language. Temple, for those of you that don't know, Temple Grandin is PhD. She's a well-known author. She's written, I think, 8 or 9 books. She's a professor at Colorado State University, an autism advocate, and she tells us that repetitive rocking motion, that's back and forth or side to side, that requires a person to continually find and re-find their balance, stimulates areas of the brain where learning receptors are located. So if you're a provider and you have individuals who rock forward or side to side, what they're doing is actually stabilizing themselves. They're actually rocking so back and forth so that they can balance the variables in the environment in the brain. These are some stats from the Center for Disease Control in California. New case of autism diagnosed every 20 minutes. 1 in 50 children on the autism spectrum are being born each year. Estimated economic impact is over $90 billion a year. 1 in 54 males. The ratio is 6 to 1. The average cost is $60,000 a year of out-of-pocket for the parents. Fortunately, the insurance companies have begun to pick up a lot of behavior for our kids, and early intervention, as we know, is the key. So some of that out-of-pocket money is being taken care of by the insurance companies. I have a leg of Autism Movement Therapy that is a behavioral service, and we work with all the insurance companies and go into the home and deliver an ABA service, Applied Behavioral Analysis service. Autism is the fastest growing developmental disability in the U.S. And right now, as of now, we know there's no cure. More facts, 1.5 million cases in the U.S. That could reach 4 million in the next decade. It's not specific to race, socioeconomics, or parental educational levels. The big increase in autism was 1998 to 2002 in the state of California. And these cases represent over 18% of California's regional centers. If you're not in California, you may not have regional centers. We have regional centers that provide services, speech and language, behavioral, social skills in the home and in the school setting. The annual budget for autism spectrum disorders care is more than $171 million. The cases account for nearly 60% of the intake in the regional centers. I believe that's a little higher now. So what are we saying? Basically, the overall increase in autism from 1987 just to 1998 was 273%. It's a pandemic. So let's look at the brain. We've got the four lobes. There we go. The four lobes, the frontal lobe. I don't know why we're frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. Are you? I'm sorry if it's falling out. There, it's coming back. Okay, good. It's blinking, so it's falling out. I'm sorry. But we're going to go on and discuss each one of the areas. The frontal lobe, concerned with reasoning, planning, parts of speech and movement, emotions, and problem solving. That's the blue area there where you see the arrow. Because it's a 3D, it's blinking out, but it's coming back on. I'm sorry. But you can see the frontal lobe, and we know that's the area at the front of the brain. That's the executive functioning area. That's the area when you have a child and you clean out his desk at school and you pull out a plastic bag and then there's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you're like, this peanut butter and jelly sandwich is from December. That's that whole reasoning, planning, that frontal lobe executive area of the brain, which our kids have a lot of challenge with. The temporal is right next to the ear, so what do you think? What's happening there? That's the area that's receiving the stimuli and the variables from the environment. It's concerned with recognition of auditory stimuli. So hearing and right on the other side of the ear and embedded deep in there is the hippocampus. There's two, and those are the memory areas. Many of our kids excel in this area, so they're getting a lot of transmission of neurotransmission in the hippocampus area. So their memory is really great. All right, so parietal, concerned with perception of stimuli related to touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. You know how a lot of our kids can't be touched. That was the premise for the Kiefer Sutherland show. That's why it was called Touch. The little boy David, who played his son, had autism and was not able to be touched. Many of our kids, to a lesser or greater degree, have issues with that area of the parietal lobe. Also, wearing pants or only can wear sweatpants. Don't like tags in the shirt. That's all parietal lobe reception of transneural information. Occipital, located at the very back of the brain. It's behind the parietal and the temporal lobe, and that's our vision area. That's concerned with vision and gross motor. Here are the side views of the lobes: frontal, occipital, parietal, and the temporal. We're going to talk, and I'm going to go briefly through this so we can get to the speech and language area, because that's what we've seen the most progress with Autism Movement Therapy, speech and language kicking in. So what we know is this cerebral cortex is that area that surrounds that layer of tissue that's about 2 to 3 dimes thick. It comes from the Greek word bark. So it surrounds the brain, and the key role it plays is in memory, attention, perceptual awareness, thought, language, and consciousness. Most of the actual information processing in the brain takes place in the cerebral cortex. That is because the cortex is the gray matter and the nerves run through that, and it's an insulation that makes the other parts of the brain appear to be white. So there's gray and there's white, and then the folds in the brain add to the surface area. So if you take the brain out and you spread it out, it's going to take up a large surface area. But because it's compressed and folded, and then the transmission of the neurons is moving through that gray matter, through the processing of the white matter, that's how the information is processed. So let's look here at the group of receptive neurons in the brain. All of these are receptors that are living on the cortex. As you can see, auditory, speech and language, the prefrontal area, the motor association, the primary motor area, the visual at the back, and the Wernicke's area. Wernicke's is associated with speech and language. We're going to get to that in a minute. Breaking that down again, motor association, you'll see where the arrow goes. coordination of complex movement. You see it, it's coming right into the orange area. Primary motor cortex, imitation of voluntary movement, coming into that slender kind of a pale turquoise. Prefrontal cortex, problem solving, emotion, complex thought, right there at the that's right in the frontal lobe again. Primary somatosensory receives tactile information from the body, again, that area where pins and needles can't be touched. I can't wear these jeans. The tag on the back of my shirt is itching me. I'm going to go right into the next slide because I want to talk about the Wernicke's and the Broca's area. So here we're looking at auditory, again, cortex, detection of sound, quality, the loudness, and the tone, right there on the inside of our ear. Now let's look at the Broca's area. That's the speech production and articulation. Frontal lobe, the red area on the left visual of the brain. That's the area that we're working with actual speech production, speaking, talking. The Wernicke's area is right here behind it. It's the purple, and that's associated with the processing of words. So that is the pragmatics. When we hear a speech and language pathologist talk about the pragmatics are impaired or challenged, that's the area where not being able to put, choose, and speak the right words comes from that area. The actual speaking of those words is processed in the Broca's area. So there's two areas on the left side of the brain that are working with and dealing with speech and language. And as we know, that's a criteria for autism. And most of our kids have, to a lesser or greater degree, some kind of a challenge in either the Broca's, speaking, or the Wernicke's area with their pragmatics. This is me speaking with Neil Katz, Elaine Hall's son. I actually took the headphones off and transferred them, as you can see, onto myself. He wasn't comfortable with that in the beginning, but as we went along over the course of the week, he was able to allow me to do that because he could still see them on my head, and then we began to actually speak. He can speak, but Neil is 21 now, and most of the muscles in the face and the neck have atrophied from not using them. So he speaks very softly, yes. With exercise and help, we could increase the speech volume for him, as well as the speech itself. Okay, what are we talking about with autism movement therapy? Patterns and sequencing, starting and stopping, and repetition. It's all built on patterns and sequences, starting and stopping, and repetition of those patterns. Here is an autism movement therapy certification workshop. We do a lot of cross-hemispheric work. As you can see, I'm sitting on the floor on the right-hand slide and working with Jenny, and we are actually doing a cross-hemispheric alphabet and animal strategy. So this again is talking about the white and the gray matter. Quickly, I want to go through it. We only have 20 minutes. White matter, if you think about the brain as a computer, the white matter would be the cords that you plug into the wall to get the stimulation of the energy going, and the gray matter would be your computer itself, the computer itself. So what is AMT? An empowering strategical instructional method that strengthens both the left and right hemispheres of the brain. It's interhemispheric integration by combining patterning, visual movement calculation, audio receptive processing, rhythm and sequencing for a whole brain cognitive thinking approach that improves behavioral, emotional, academic, social, and speech and language skills through remapping of the brain. This, again, we all know, left and right hemisphere of the brain, what are the kind of jobs that the left does and the right does. It's not quite as delineated as this is in our brains, but we do know that the left is more logical, the right is more artistic. The left is more verbal, the right is visual. Left responds to words, meaning, responds to tone of voice in the right. Sequential in the left, random in the right. processes information linearly. This is a biggie. Processes information in varied order. This comes down to our kids that can see whole pictures and detailed pictures. Whole ideas and then very detailed idea. Responds to logic and plans ahead. Responds to emotions. That's the right. Responds to emotions. That's where many of our children live. Recalls people's names. Recalls people's faces. If you go to a party and you meet somebody and you have a nice exchange, and then they said at the beginning, my name is James. And I said, oh, my name is Joanne. So nice to meet you. And I walk away and I go, what was his name? I'm a visual learner, and I need that visual little name tag. That's why at my certification workshops, everybody has to wear the name tag for the first day, so I can get to know their name, that visual processing. Right, it responds to visual, to the faces, but left is responding to that actual processing of the name itself being spoken. Speaks with few gestures when speaking. Punctual, less punctual. Prefers formal study design. Prefers sound and music background while studying. I have classical music playing now, and I put it on as soon as I get up in the morning, and I turn it off when I go to bed at night. Some people are not able to work or read or do any of the daily activities with background music. Prefers bright lights while studying. Prefers frequent mobility, getting up, walking around, changing environments. So that's the left and right stops. What's the issue? The left and right hemispheres not talking to each other. The connective tissue, or that corpus callosum that we talked about, it runs through the middle of the brain. It serves as the conduit or the bridge between the left and right hemispheres. The studies indicate that the bridge can be strengthened. That's what we want to do in order to transmit more information between the left and right hemisphere. And that's the primary goal of autism movement therapy, is to wake up the brain. This is a great study. It was done in 2001. Kristen Hartshorn et al. She had 38 kids. They're given movement therapy in a small group led by a trained movement therapist. And after 2 months, bi-weekly sessions, the children spent less time wandering, more time showing on-task behavior, less time showing negative responses to being touched, and less time resisting the teacher than those in the control group. I'm hoping to get a study going. There's been a couple of music studies out, and more specifically recently out of Harvard, on the importance of movement and how movement is, music is kicking in speech and language, helping to kick in speech and language with our kids. But we don't have a definitive evidence-based research study on movement per se, except for this one. How does it work? It's actually the Autoaerobics DVD, which you can purchase on my website, is broken into 3 levels, and each of those levels is 11 to 12 minutes long, and each of those levels is dealing with the strengthening of the left and right hemisphere of the brain by combining patterning, visual movement, audio processing, rhythm, tempo, and sequencing. I say it's a natural strategy for students with limited speech because they're able to express themselves through the movement and music, and at the same time experience the thrill of actually moving their bodies through space. Here's some more pictures from the classes. We're based here in Los Angeles, California. We know what the effects of music are: ability to transport our minds and reflect our thoughts, redirect our thoughts. Music calms and helps to regulate our moods. Dance and music has an enormous effect on our thinking and how we process information, and we use all our senses when we dance. Most important of all, we use our whole brain. I think one of the facts out of this that I love is the first music therapy program in this country was started at Michigan State University in 1944. So music therapy has been around for a long time. Our kids have been accessing music therapy for a long time. Now we know that the movement and the music combined together is making an enormous amount of progress with our kids, specifically in the speech and language, also in the gross and motor, in the imitation, and the visual processing areas. There's the 3 levels. The levels are emerging, developing, and proficient. There's another picture of just a recent picture of our class. When's a good time to do it? I think it's great to do it every day. I get parents telling me that, especially with these 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds where they get the DVD and they do it at home, they call me or email me and say the child is speaking their first words. And that's from them telling me that they're doing it every day. They're doing level 1 every day. I found personally when I was at Stephen Gutstein's school, who is the founder of RDI here in Los Angeles, we had a school. I did a study there, was teaching there, and we did 12 weeks. And I found that 2 and 3 sessions a week with those students, that they were more compliant when asked to work on tasks, and they interacted with their typical general education peers more frequently, and also the speech and language kicked in. Also, we see an increased overall self-determination awareness. Their self-esteem skills progress, and they're capable of performing more independently overall. But the biggest discovery was that the children with challenged speech and language communication skills made substantial progress with the pragmatics of language and actual speech articulation. I love this proverb, Yiddish proverb, with time even a bear can learn to dance. You'll get a lot of educators and individuals that we work with, they'll say, I can't dance. But everybody can, and all of our kids love to move and dance to music. And what we're doing is using that left side of our brain to remember the patterns in the sequencing. We're using the right side of the brain to visually process the movement and hear the music. And then we're using that bridge between the left and right hemisphere to execute and perform the sequences. Strategies to remember when you're presenting a movement and music program. You want short, simple movements. Don't start with chorus line, 84 counts. You really want to start with very simple 8-count movements. Predictable, and you want to repeat them. I do a movement with clapping hands. It's good to marry that gross motor and that audio processing together. We get a lot of progress when we marry speech and language with gross motor. I have something that I call story dancing that we do in the Autism Movement Therapy certification workshops that I actually trademarked, and that's moving again to gross motor and audio processing. Music with identifiable beat. We do freeze dance, and I always, when I was in the classroom 10 years in Los Angeles Unified School District, I played soft instrumental music, either classical or Asian music, throughout the day on my CD player if I wasn't giving a direct instruction. Here's a friend of mine, Joel Anderson. He's about 22. He's actually doing the Autoaerobics DVD in his home living room. That's a picture of him doing it to the monitor, TV monitor. His mom said it to me. I love it. I put this slide in because this is a friend of mine, Sharon Hensel Cohen, who's a speech and language path here in Los Angeles, and we delivered AMT outside, putting 2 mirrors together with my little CD player. So you can do it everywhere. More pictures, certification workshop. I'm seeing Tyler says, wrap it up, all righty. Again, another slide of the brain. It's all about the brain. More pictures. And there we go. Thank you so much for attending. I hope it's been beneficial, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. Tyler.
Great, Joanne. Thanks a lot for that. We've got a couple here. My child is 3 years old. Is he too young to do AMT?
No, absolutely not. We have, the youngest I've had is 2. 2 is a little bit too young. 3, the children are able to access the variables in the environment, move to the music, and follow the directions. So 3, especially with the DVD, 3 and up is fine. So, yeah, 3 is a fabulous age to start.
Okay. From a professional, I'm interested in getting certified in AMT. How do I go about that?
We offer in Los Angeles 3 certification workshops a year here in LA. at my home studio, and they are in October, March, and June. I actually have a special certification workshop in February 22nd and 23rd in Eugene, Oregon. And then here in California, Los Angeles, March 15th and 16th. And then June 21st and 22nd here in Los Angeles. And on my website, you go onto autismmovementtherapy.org and click on certification. And that will give the dates, and you can actually register and pay on that page, that certification page.
All right. Well, Joanne, I really appreciate the presentation on today's program. To find programs and services like Autism Movement Therapy, you can also visit providersearch.com and type in AMT, Autism Movement Therapy, Joanne Lara, or simply search the keyword Autism Services. And with that, that concludes today's presentation. Again, I would like to invite all of our attendees today to join us again next week as we continue our series. So thank you everyone for attending.